Welcome to the second episode of the Haifa Wave podcast, hosted by Tony Wolkovitzky. Today we're joined by Jay, an Austrian of Persian origin, for an in-depth discussion on European, Middle Eastern, and global politics. Together we'll dive into recent developments in Austria, the Middle East, and the United States. So buckle up and get ready for an engaging ride through the currents of world affairs all over the world. It's the Haifa Wave, baby. Get ready for some Haifa Wave. Tony's in the house, yo. Just a little bit more. Bring back the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Bear with us.
Thatcher did nothing wrong.
Austrian painter making a comeback. No, Elon, don't do that. Never Trump. Use the M. Just a little bit more. We're almost there. Globalism is good, actually. EU for me and you. Here he comes, the one and only.
Hi, Jay. Welcome to my podcast. It's nice having you here.
Hello, nice to have be on your podcast anyways, and I hope we'll be able to have a wonderful conversation.
Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
So, hello, my name, as you mentioned, is Jay. I live in Vienna, Austria, and we happen to have had interactions with you, Tony, since we're a student organization. And as mentioned, I was born in Vienna and I was raised here. I lived all my life here. I have traveled many different countries and was able to experience their cultures, but I never really lived somewhere else, you could say. And my origins, of course, are not Austrian completely. Like, I'm not like descendant of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In my case, my parents came from Iran, and I have a connection to my Persian heritage as well. I identify myself both as an Austrian as well as an Iranian. I think it's entirely possible to be identifying yourself with your roots while at the same time being also like an Austrian, you could say. That's how I would feel myself.
And anyways, we recently had, not recently, but on the September 29th, we had the elections in Austria. I don't know if you heard about it. And now they are finally starting the negotiations of the biggest party, which is the Freedom Party, which is like let's just say the populist right-wing party with connections to the National Socialist Times a little bit. And it's quite depressing, honestly.
Yeah, we're definitely like it's like we're kind of reviving retro times, like, or like vintage, like, could you call it like a vintage party, like far right Austria? Like, they just need like an Austrian painter in the top of the party, and we're back in we're back at now it's called vintage, this is what it's so.
What was the quote by George Lucas? He said that history does not repeat itself, it rhymes. I think he said that. I think that was his quote.
Yeah, I know Marx, actually, that he said, like, I think that, was it Marx? Yeah, I think it was Marx who said that history repeats twice, once as a tragedy and once as a farce. Like, the second time is a farce. But George Lucas, could be like, it sounds familiar as well. Like, I think I heard this. Like, it does. It does. It's really
well, if you know that, if you look at the fact that we are now at the year 2025. I always think of 100 years before that, 1925, and look at the history of Europe in the 1920s. We saw a lot of democracies that were just established emerging to become dictators. Not only Germany, but also other countries, including, I think Poland was also one of those countries that ended up becoming more of a authoritarian state. I think the only country in Central Europe that actually was more or less more democratic was, I think, Czechoslovakia back then.
Hmm. Yeah, like I don't remember really, like, when I think about it, like all I remember about like Czechoslovakia back then is like how it was for history classes, of course, like about how it was taken out of, like taken by Hitler back then. I like, yeah, like I guess so. I guess so. Like I think that we like definitely live in an interesting time right now. There are many parallels. I think that hopefully we won't reach the same situation. But I recently just thought about like also this tendency of like the United States of becoming more, like going towards the especially you can see it like now under Trump, like more strongly, like to this kind of approach, which is more isolationist, even though it's not fully, yeah, like still United States does take stance in, like even under Trump on issues, as we see now, like also with the hostage deal and so on. But you do see this rhetoric that he always talks about how he would, wouldn't involve America in needless wars. You want to take out America from interfering in other places, and so on and so on. And it kind of reminds the moods of post World War One in America. Now, I thought what could be like the whole situation of World War One, like the isolationism was like a response towards kind of how basically people didn't understand why World War One started from the first place. So after a needless war, people were so traumatized and so like confused and angry about like being involved in such a war that like even involvement in a war that is needed and like taking a stance which is needed in the world against Nazi Germany was a big issue for the public. And I think right now, in response to what's happening, for example, with Russia, we might face similar situation. And then I think I thought hardly like what could have been this World War One experience, and I would say that the like we could draw the parallel actually with Iraq War.
You mean the 2003 one?
Yeah, like the second Iraq War. Yeah, like just in the sense that this war, like I think caused such damage to kind of first of all the image of United States for kind of like like before that you kind of felt that there is like that they're kind of reasonable, but then like just like the whole war of like going without a lot of proof, just going and like changing the regime in the country, and like like going on such a war, like you could understand, for example, Afghanistan, right? Like because Afghanistan was a response to 9/11, but like Iraq, it didn't seem that there like it seemed that it was most like more like they could do it, and they said like, yeah, why wouldn't we do it? Let's do it. And this kind of created this kind of negativity that all, if you think about it, all the presidents afterwards kind of tried to distance themselves from this image. Like Obama tried to kind of like show, oh, I don't want to look like I'm involving the United States in another war like that. So often he's like, he was treading too carefully on things because he didn't want to look like he bringing troops like to some other country like George Bush. And then you have even Trump who behaved, who wanted to distance him. So all the and like obviously Joe Biden. So you have these leaders who kind of like took a few steps back towards like I wouldn't say that Joe Biden or Obama were isolationists, but it was step back. Like they took a step back in order to not look like George Bush, which might have not happened if like George Bush wouldn't involve America in this war.
Yeah, it is difficult times. I think that sometimes you have to understand the atmosphere of the public opinion. I think the appetite for war has become much less. And I think that the Iraq war was a situation where the people lost their hope to the institutions of intelligence. I think the George W. Bush administration, especially, I don't know if you know much about what's his name again? Colin Powell. You know, Colin Powell was once a really respected man when it comes to his presence in American political situation. And he used him and he damaged him and he tainted his reputation based on, let's just say at the moment, in retrospect, very flimsy intelligence that ended up destroying his, I think, and he tried to weasel himself out by saying, look, it's also about democracy and human rights, which again, if that would be the case, he could have said that at least from initially, but then again, that's not really an argument to start a war. His argument was it should be a preemptive war to prevent Iraq to be able to establish such weapons of mass destruction. Of course, we should also recognize the fact that Saddam was not the most trustworthy person. So it was a situation where we're talking about a man who lost a lot of reputation because of the fact that he lied about his weapons program before, if you remember. So it is, I think this created a situation where the people were pressurized. And I think a lot of people voted for Obama because of that. They wanted something that was against the principles of the Bush administration. They were just tired from the Iraq war. And Afghanistan, the same. And now Trump is trying to co-opt that to a certain extent. And I think the Trump administration is trying to play this both sides. It is claiming to be this anti-war party, but then again, it is also claiming to want to start. I think the one thing that's now happening that is very dangerous is that he has declared a Mexican cartel as a terrorist organization. Now, if you are aware of American politics, there's something called the AUMF. I think it's the Authorization Against Military Force Against Terrorism, War on Terror. And since they declared this Mexican cartel as a terrorist organization, the United States government is not obligated to declare a war against these terrorist organizations. Like they don't have to go to Congress. He can basically drone strike them. He can use bombers. He can do whatever he wants based on the war on terror. And that's very dangerous, I would say. So he's putting us in a situation of war, honestly. So his narrative is a bit schizophrenic, I could say.
Maybe just like it's a thing that he has with he doesn't like Mexico too much, huh? Like it's like about that. Yeah, definitely there is like this double speak on all sides. Like, look, to be fair, also when you had like Obama come to office, so obviously overall, I do think that the general American position, with the exception of like I think the war in Iraq was an outlier, even for like it's something. Well, it was something unusual, relatively, even for George Bush, because he didn't do other wars like that. This was the only war like that was like that. Like as we talked about, like as I mentioned, like Afghanistan was justified. Now, like in other cases, so because like Obama didn't want to look like basically Bush. So, for example, when there was the need in intervention that they wanted to promote intervention in Libya, for example, so he had like this approach of, if I remember correctly, it was called leading from behind, like like in the sense that we'll let France to bomb it, but like United States will support, like, but not as the main.
But wasn't it technically speaking initially a no-fly zone? that ended up becoming more of an intervention, the Libya war?
Um,
I think it was a United Nations Security Council resolution. I think that even the Russians, like they abstained, they didn't participate, of course, but it was, I think, initially as a no-fly zone, and then basically just intervened directly afterwards as a result, and then coupled him up.
well, to be honest, like I didn't check it like right now. Like I just rely on my memory. It does
Mm.
ring a bell what you said about no-fly zone. It makes sense, but there was there was an intervention afterwards, like in the sense that
Yeah, yeah.
France like
They
did bomb them. Like this is I remember correctly, and like they bombed them, and United States joined, if I remember correctly. Like
But
just
it
like
was
has
also the Benghazi rebels that essentially ended up doing most of the work as well. It was just that the Americans and the Western allies were basically the quote unquote Air Force for them.
yeah
And they
yeah
neutralized the Air Force of the Gaddafi government, basically. That ended up giving the Benghazi rebels an advantage to be able to take over Tripoli eventually.
yeah. Well, that's still an involvement, and what back then like I was way more like kind of like against any interventionism back then. Now I'm like less fundamentalist in this sense. Like when you're younger, you're more ideological and all that, and more idealist, I would say, than ideological. So, but the point is that that back then, like my criticism, and actually, like my thought about this remains the same, that when you intervene as a foreign power in a civil war of another country, you necessarily make it worse, because even if you're helping, like let's say the good side, it's questionable whether like the rebels were completely the good side, right? But we saw what happened like afterwards, all the like chaos. But I mean, like even if you're like fighting the other horrible regime, say that you prevented like genocide there or whatever, that they were afraid that like he basically shot his own people, just like Assad wanted to massacre people and so on. So you try to prevent this, but when you're like a third party there and you take a side, it stops being like a civil war. It becomes like a war, like generally. So first of all, you compromise the other side that becomes associated with foreign interference. So the rebels, even if they're positive force, they automatically be labeled as those who are sponsored by, like let's say, the West, for example, or something like that.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you also, when you bomb, it's never it's never really victimless. Like you always have collateral damage, and you have, and when like the rebels fight each other, they like, they have like civil war, then it's kind of internal thing. But when you have like suddenly like France and America bomb kill um and kill like people who are like locals there, like kill Libyan civilians, it's not like anymore like a civil internal war. It's like already like a conflict between cultures, a conflict between countries. You get my point. People know like, oh, these American aircrafts killed their relatives, or like these French aircrafts killed their relatives. You get what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, essentially, warfare, especially the modern kind, has never. You can't really have a war with casualties. I think the civilian deaths is an inevitable reality in a war, which
Yeah.
brings us to the question of: is the war necessary? Is there no alternatives to the war? And that's something you
Yeah.
can have then a debate about philosophically. If the alternative does not exist, then is it justified? Again, it's a difficult choice.
Hmm.
Sending soldiers to die is also a difficult choice in general, even if you don't have
Hmm.
the notion of losing civilians, you soldiers will die and they have their parents and they have their children. So it's not
Definitely.
such an easy task as well in such cases as well. It's very difficult for a general to write a letter sending their condolences to the loved ones of someone who dies. It's not an easy task.
Hmm.
And I think as the commander in chief of a country, you're also in a situation Which again, I think there's certain. I think I was like you again as well, since you mentioned about your views about interventionism. I think that if a war is done short and effective, I see no just a problem with it as well. Maybe I also changed my mind. For example, if you
Mm,
look at in retrospect, for example, the Kosovo intervention, I think the fact of the matter is that Kosovo today is doing much better, and I think that a lot of people's lives were saved due to the intervention by NATO. And I think it
mhm,
was a correct choice by the NATO to do so. And in spite of the propaganda that the Serbs do, and I think in some cases it is a little bit exaggerated, I would say. Yeah, it is unfortunate that people died, civilians, and I think that ideally it would have been better that they wouldn't pass away. But it is a I still think that it was a justified war, and I think that I think the Republicans, some at least, were a bit critical of that war, interestingly, but I think no one actually today really talks negatively about the Kosovo war, or shall I say the NATO war against Serbia, the way like we talk about Iraq. And I don't think anyone actually retrospectively says anything negative about it, maybe like Serbia, but I'm talking about
mhm,
the West now.
mhm. Yeah, Serbia and Russia, of course, Russia was like always negative, even though they didn't do anything to stop, but because they weren't like they had different regime back then, and they had like the different president, and they had like, but they always were like pro Serbia because of their connections and all that. So yeah, like look, I would say something like this. My views changed about this as well. I was like way more fundamentalist in this approach of, yeah, we just shouldn't intervene. No one should intervene. But the point is that like often people think that like only United States is like the one who's doing it, and that if United States will not do it, then nobody will. But we see now that when the United States like kind of leave space and doesn't like like try to avoid that to a certain extent, other countries step in, and like Russia and China step in, and they're doing their own thing, which is also interventionism, and it's worse. Like very often, it's worse, like in this sense. So at least America like sometimes relies on the like very often try to justify it with like bringing democracy, bring freedom, and so on and so on. What we see with China and Russia, specifically with Russia right now, China's like still threatening. They're not doing anything directly, but they're like spreading autocracy wherever they like try to spread. So that's a major problem there. Um, there was I watched this interview, like could you say podcast with trigonometry,
Mhm.
trigonometry with this analyst of Syria called like something like Little. What's his name? I will tell you just a second. Yeah, here it is. Like it's called Thomas Small. I remember Little. Yeah, Thomas Small. This is the
Thomas
guy.
Small.
He's like it's called, the title is like the best Syria breakdown you'll ever hear. Okay, like like it's just like a headline, for like a clickbait headline. But the point is that in this video, he basically makes an interesting argument that when he breaks down like the whole history of like the Syrian civil war, he talks about the point where he thinks that America messed up, and
Mhm.
it was when Assad used the chemical weapons. He said that this was the breaking point where like probably the whole thing started to go downhill. Okay, because America, like under Obama back then, they said that this is the red line, and then when he crossed this line, everybody expected America to intervene, because America said like don't use chemical weapons. If you use, we'll intervene. Everybody expected, and then uh, um, because Obama didn't want to look like George Bush, that he bring brings America into another conflict and so on. The response was like very, very limited and very, very weak, and basically nothing happened. I think there were like maybe some bombings or whatever, but nothing serious, and there were no serious repercussions as a result. And he said that it made like leaders like Putin look, and like other leaders like in Iran and in other places, to look and see like America doesn't do anything right now, so maybe we can intervene now. And then they put forward their like stronger support for Assad's regime, and then like kind of gave basically helped it survive. And from there, you can say that might be that Russian expansionism and all that went forward, and you could say that their attempt of Crimea, that now, looking back, we think like, yeah, it was a mistake not to respond stronger, but back then, like, nobody could guess that, they would do what they did now, like in 2023. Wait, 20. Was it 20? No, it wasn't 23. It was, when did the war with Ukraine began? Like 22 or 21?
February 22nd, 22.
22, right. So,
and the Obama red line was 2012, while the Russian annexation, you're correct, happened 2 years afterwards.
Uh-huh.
So it was before Russia intervened, basically, and then started also to support the rebels, or should I say, so-called rebels in the Donbass.
Yeah. Now, this to be said, I personally still like Obama. Like, I think that this was a mistake, but I think overall his presidency was good. I do think that he did put some, like, was trying to kind of stop Russia as much as possible. But yeah, he had this fear of like not being, he didn't want to be perceived as Bush. And
I think also the Libya, I would say Libya also influenced him. I think that the intervention in Libya made him have this fear of doing it again in Syria. True. I have this feeling.
Like I think they sacked the American embassy then, and like
Benghazi happened. You saw,
yeah.
And that was you could say it kind of did hurt Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what. I think he got cold feet. And one thing I just want to add, you're correct. Everything you said was correct. But Obama was actually kind of sneaky. So after the red line situation, which was, I think, a big mistake, he decided to say, well, I will give it to Congress to do it. So basically, and he gave it to Congress, and Congress basically, since it was controlled by the Republicans, didn't want to intervene as well. So it ended up nothing happening, basically. So it was kind of like manipulative.
They call it kick the can down the road, to a certain extent. Like say, like you pass it on to another authority, and then even though kick the can is usually to pass it to the next administration, which is also true because it became a problem of the next administration as well. Trump also had his parts there, like in taking out like the little like. At some point, because of ISIS, because of Daesh, like kind of all the West was forced to intervene in Syria to a certain extent. But then, like Trump just talked. I think he had like a talk on the phone with I think Erdogan. Erdogan is like.
But Obama did begin the attacks on ISIS, to be fair to him, afterwards. So when ISIS started to emerge, especially it was in the last years of his presidency, he did support the international war against ISIS. And
but
Trump took it over and he ended it, and Trump basically took credit for it. But you have many things. In this case, it's also fair to say Obama started it, to be honest.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, this is why I mentioned like that the West was forced because of Daesh was forced to
Yeah.
intervene, but it wasn't because of the red lines of like Assad. It was because of Daesh, because literally Daesh began began doing terror attacks in America and Europe or wherever, and executing Western hostages in horrific ways and whatnot. So like obviously they were forced at this point, uh, and like in the end who ended like the American intervention is Trump there, but after a call with Erdogan, and basically pleaded American influence in Syria in favor of Erdogan. So this is another authoritarian force that you say like, well, I don't think that it's better than America there, right? Like, I mean, America has its flaws, but it's not like, I don't want to offend my Turkish friends, but it's not Turkey. I'm sorry. Like, Turkey is not an example, and I would say my own country is also not an example of like perfect governance and like a place that I do think that America in this sense is the better influence. Yeah, definitely. So
And one thing I should mention, since you mentioned that it was kind of, I think it was Trump who basically betrayed the Kurds in Syria, basically allowing the Turks to basically take over some parts of their territory in the Syrian, parts of
yeah,
the YPG. It was under
he
the Trump
he
administration that happened.
yeah, he did betray his like he did betray. Like, I mean, it's hard to say betray because he doesn't really owe them anything against himself, but yeah, he just kind of neglected them and in favor of his own interest, whatever for Erdogan. And for Erdogan it became like now he's like he has a major win now, like many years after, but like eventually this led to that as well, eventually, like among other things that happened accidentally, like the war like in the Middle East right now, that caused the whole domino thing that shifted Syria now. But like the fact that he like kind of ceded the rebels, like the support for the rebels, mainly to Turkey, and removed the United States from the equation, kind of, and like neglected the few allies that America had in Syria. So like it led also to the situation right now that Turkey is the main influence in Syria right now.
Yeah, and
So
I don't know if you read about this, but the new government is trying to appease the Turkish government significantly. And I think look, I think it's fair to say that under the Assad regime, which is, I don't hope no one misunderstands what I'm saying as a
hmm
support.
hmm
Assad was terrible, as you mentioned, chemical attacks. That was terrible, unimaginable. If it were up to me, he should be in the Hague. That's
hmm
just to clarify this, so that no one misunderstands what I'm saying. But the
hmm
rebels, I always felt that they were basically proxies of the Turkish government. And I
hmm
think that the Turkish government is going to basically, Syria went from a proxy of the Iranians and the Russians to a proxy of the Turkish government.
yeah. No, look. To be fair, there were rebels which were, I think, from Free Syrian Army. Like they were called the Free Syrian Army. They were like more liberal. They were like supported by the United States. They basically like non-existent at this point. I think there is like some small part there like left, maybe, I'm not sure. But so those rebels, like because they lost the support of America, obviously they either flock to Syria and join the Islamists, or they join like they could join also SDF, like the Kurdish, even though it's not only Kurdish, like there are also Arabs there, but like mainly majority Kurdish SDF, Syrian Democratic.
I
Uh,
think Assyrians as well, if I recall correctly. Assyrians and other minorities are part of this SDF coalition.
sorry,
Uh,
who's, can you repeat?
Assyrians. I heard that Assyrians are also
Assyrians.
Assyrians. Ashuri.
Assyrians, interesting. Yeah, I got what you mean. Yeah, I got what you mean. Yes, and yeah, that's an interesting question because I know, at least in Iraq, that there's a huge blood feud between like Assyrians and the Kurds, and Assyrians accuse the Kurds uh, for like genocide during the Ottoman period that they supposedly, like, which is, I mean, also no disrespect to Assyrians, but I find it like really bizarre at this time that many of them are like against Kurdish autonomy in like Iraq because they're like or Kurdish independence because they say no, the Kurds like oppressed us during the Ottoman period and like participated in a genocide, which like as horrible as that it might be, but really what I mean like what does it have to do with the fact that now they need like like they need self-governance independence, and also are they really like the only ones who participated? Like I mean regular Muslim Arabs weren't part of the Ottoman Empire, and like of course they were, and also like is it really are I don't know like the other groups that much better towards Assyrians than by their treatment than Kurds? I'm not sure. Like so it seems like a weird kind of resentment that they have towards specifically Kurds, and I don't know why. I'm not sure if it's the same in Syria. So I do know that like there are certain parts who are more kind of as any group you have like all kinds of people from like some support that faction and some support other factions, so I guess you could find all kinds of Assyrians, those who support the Kurds and those who don't support. But I've seen online a lot of things also about like Assyrians who talked in favor of Assad. Now I don't know if it's fake accounts or something, but I did notice a lot of accounts like that who posted these kind of things. Like they kind of perceived Assad as protector of minorities because he himself from minorities is a minority. And I know that many did feel this way because also many Druze in Syria supported and participated in his army. This is why there was this whole thing. You remember in the news there was like that some Druze wanted to join Israel suddenly because they were afraid of the new regime. It's not because they love Israel, like the Druze in Syria. They never were like supporters of Israel back then, but because they like supported Assad before, and they were afraid that they will face retribution because of that.
Yeah, but what I remember is that the YPG also has Assyrian written on their flag. That's why I remembered.
Oh,
And
the language.
yeah, they had their language, and I think there are militia groups, Assyrian militia groups that are part of it. So I think again, in Iraq, it's a bit different when it comes to the Syrians. They had this conflict, and I think that what you said, technically speaking, should be actually more towards Turkey. Actually, the Kurds in Turkey were mostly collaborators with the Ottomans during the genocide, to be honest. And if you look at the cities that are in the East Turkey, like Van, they are now like primarily majority Kurdish. And a lot of them lived in places that were Armenian. So basically, yeah, in Turkey it's correct, but Iraq, I don't understand that. I think it's a bit. It doesn't make sense. You're correct on that issue.
I look. I don't know if I'm correct actually because I'm not like an expert on this, and I just know this again. Like what I'm saying, it's not my opinion. It's just
yes, you're correct that there is this conflict between the Assyrians in Iraq. What you're saying is correct. I'm just saying is that for me it also doesn't make sense,
yeah,
historically speaking.
yeah. I know. I mean, but still, I leave space for error, like in the sense that it doesn't make sense to me, but also it might be not making sense to me because I simply not educated enough on this specific conflict. Because again, I know kind of maybe people who are listening to this, it seems that I know a lot about this because I have a lot to say. So maybe like for an Israeli in this sense, or like for person not from there, I know like it's more than the average person knows about this because many people don't even know that there is like this kind of tension there. But on the other hand, I also don't know like deeply the history and like all the you know uh, all the little details there, and might be that I'm wrong and that like they are right, and that really there were like some evidence of, I don't know, like Kurdish collaboration in Iraq as well. I have no idea, but in any case, even if it's true, it doesn't seem to me like it's like almost ancient history, right? Like it's not really ancient history, but like it's long time ago. It happened like long time ago, and I don't see how it should affect now the situation, especially when you have forces that are not like it's not like the Kurds are more extreme against Assyrians or whatever than other forces in Iraq. Like, so I don't get why there was specific this kind of resentment for them.
And also to add some nuances, the fact that for example, one thing is interesting. I don't know if you noticed the Erbil, which is one of the major cities of Kurdish Iraq. Their football stadium is named Franco Toma Hariri, who is a Iraqi Assyrian politician who was part of the Kurdish Democratic Party. So it's more complicated than that. It's more nuanced, and I think there are conflicts between the two sides, but there are also some friendships as well. So we should mention that as well, to making sure that people know it's not as black and white as some people might think it is.
Of course, definitely. And I mean, like, the Middle East, well, is always very, very complicated. And just to say, oh, like the Assyrians support this, and Arabs, like Sunni Arabs, support that, and I don't know, like Shia supports this, and Jews support. Like you have so many, like it's so intermixed. Like each side has their own, like Yusuf Haddad and Hassan Sheikh, blah blah. Like how it's a Masab, right? Like Masabs of their own, have their own, like it's intermixed so much. Like I mean, it's, and this is not to say that like people who intermix in this sense they necessarily like traitors or anything like that. These are extreme examples that are being perceived as traitors by each side, but there are also parts which are more moderate and kind of like still like within this, within these groups intermixed with different, different interests.
Absolutely. And if you recall the beginnings of the collapse of the Assad regime, there were some people in Latakia, which included many Alawites, who came to the rebels and said, look, we accept your government, we want to negotiate with you. And the stereotype, of course, exists simply because they're Alawites. They have to be automatically loyalists to Assad, who would sacrifice their lives for Assad. No, they didn't. They easily just gave up, and Latakia today is under the new government, basically.
Yeah.
And I think I read an interesting story that there was this one guy who they wanted to take his home. He was Alawite, and they told the government, the new, the HTS, and they came and intervened and they helped him, basically. So there is, at least I hope it continues like this. From both sides, there seems to be a reconciliation, and in spite of the fact, the perception that many have that the Alawites would automatically be fighting for Assad. No, many of them probably didn't like Assad. I can imagine it. I mean, living under Assad wasn't great. Regardless of what you think, it was a dictatorship. Even if secular dictatorship is still a dictatorship. People were tortured and. We don't have to talk too much about.
Horribly tortured.
Which is,
I mean, I think it's like somehow comparable maybe to Stalin, like in the sense that people just like, you weren't aware to all the details. You knew that, I mean, some people in the West knew that Stalin, like, executes his opponents and all that, but the real scale was exposed only after his death, and like after like came another leader in the Soviet Union. There were leaked papers, and even bigger information was revealed after the collapse of the Soviet Union, like many decades later. So like I think that we're beginning to get like a lot of things about like the brutality of this regime, like over time, that even I didn't, like I knew that it's a horrible regime, but I didn't that much details of like the level to which they, like abused prisoners, like tortured people, like like the sheer level of like brutality there. I wasn't aware of like that much details like as things being exposed right now.
You know that the Ba'ath Party of Syria, there was a Nazi. I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
to remember, there was a Nazi. He basically, I think he helped them, he trained them, and that makes it very
Oh,
unsurprising for me that why they were so terrible in these things.
oh.
I forgot his name. I think his name was Bruna.
There,
Bego.
there
No,
was this like there is
yeah,
still, I think, this Syrian party which is called, or is it Lebanese party? I think it's like it's called some.
both. SSNP, you mean?
Yeah, I think
The
so.
Syrian Socialist Nationalist Party,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah, exactly. With this like this symbol, like the red, almost like swastika, like, but it's not swastika, but it's almost a, yeah, Syrian Social Party. Yeah, it operates in Lebanon also and in Jordan apparently. Yeah, like
Yeah.
anyway,
And this
that's
Nazi that I mentioned, he was Alois Brunner. I remembered. He was an advisor to the Assad regime on intelligence and interrogation methods. So
the.
basically, everything that we probably are going to be learning about this, they were probably all students of this SS officer, basically.
Well, I
Interesting fact,
think
he was killed by Israel, by the way. If you, I don't know if you heard about this. They sent
I
him a
didn't.
letter bomb or something.
Oh, very very Mossad-like, very nice.
Yeah.
I do know that also like Soviet Union supported Syria, so it's also like has their own record of like torturing and abusing prisoners and abusing their own people. There, I
Yeah,
don't know.
and also the fact that the Saddam regime, essentially, both were, this Ba'athists, they're both Ba'athists were the same. It's just that it was a personality issue between Saddam and the Assads. But essentially, the Ba'athists, I would say, are fascist. I think it's fair to say. I think we both agree they were fascist, maybe even Nazis, you could say, if you want to use that term.
Mhm.
And they did terrible things. And there's no doubt there were a lot of skeletons that we're going to be finding now soon. And
Er,
we're going to see even worse things probably soon as well. I can
Yeah,
imagine a lot of documentaries being produced that we will shock us all.
yeah. It reminds me this like proverb that like there is this Russian proverb that like people always mention when at least like in the areas of like post-Soviet, those who speak like Russian language, they mention this like Russian proverb to explain like the brutality of the Soviet regimes before the Tsar regime, like all that. So there is this proverb that goes like "Бей своих, чтобы другие не боялись," something like that. I'm not sure that
Mm.
I said it correctly, like said it the way that it's supposed to be, because maybe change some words or whatever. Basically, hit your own in a way that others will be afraid. Like hit your own people in a way that like the others will, the enemy, like others from afar, they would see like, oh, like you're doing this to your own people. Like I don't want to mess with you, like kind of thing. So that's very much like both Syria and Soviet Union and many other countries that I won't mention here, but it's true.
Well, it's always easier to kill your own people than to kill for our enemies. For Assad, it was
Mm.
easier to kill his own people than to, let's say, start a war against Israel, let's say.
Yeah.
You would
Well,
agree. There were
well,
no
it's
ramifications if he would torture his own people. But if
the
he would, let's say, bomb Israel, that would probably hurt him.
yeah, that's the price of that's the perks of these are the perks of authoritarian regimes. Like in democratic countries, it's easier the other way around, like because it's easier to go or also stronger countries. I mean, countries which are strong, so it's easier to kind of uh, go like and bomb another country neighboring or something than to because it kind of removes the threat from inside, kind of thing, because you have like this consolidation of society when society is in war and so on and so on. It's something that on the other hand, if you we can also talk about like South Korea, for example, as an example for that. where when you're trying to do a measure, you get you're trying to kind of consolidate your power within, uh, like he tried to do like a military regime and all that, and people are like don't take his shit about this. Like they don't, like they just go and don't let him do it. And I think that we also seen this like in Israel, like things like try to do like this reform, uh, like in the court system, judicial reform, and um, like you had people in the streets, you have like huge protests, you have like things happening. So it's harder, for example, in Israel, to for the government to do something that harms the citizens, because like the institutions are very strong, like to outbalance the government. But in countries that there are no institutions that outbalance the government, so it's easier to just like they can do whatever they want in Syria, in like Russia or whatever, right? Like Belarus, like all these things, all those places.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, the people are affected by it, in this case. Yeah, it is unfortunate in this case. So, anyways, what else interesting you can
Oh, we
ask me of?
I wanted also to mention, just before we switch to another topic, we like when we talk also about the difference in the Middle East. Um, so there was like even like Lebanon is a very good example, because somebody who's like there's this meme of like showing like the person who's like the layman who like perceives things like in very simplistic way. So somebody who looks simplistically at things would be uh, um, would perceive it like, oh, like Lebanon is divided to like to these like different sects, and you have like you know you have like Christians who like are kind of ambivalent about Israel, and like more pro-Western, let's say. Then you have
Mhm.
like Shias who's like pro-Iran. You have Sunnis who are more pro, like I don't know, Saudi Arabia or something. More like towards like the general Arab League, kind of Gulf states, like all that. And basically this is like very 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 far from truth, in the sense that then if you go deeper, you see that there are Christians who, I don't know, like support Hezbollah. You have Shias who are like literally Shias who appear like who appear on TV and like criticize Hezbollah, and say that like say that they I don't know, like even like show some sort of sympathy towards Israel. Like, of course, they're like usually not religious, even though I saw even one cleric who was speaking like very badly about like Iran, for example. So like you say, like there are so many people. Like, of course, people have like different opinions, and of course there are majorities who support this or that, but like society is complex, and there are so many intermixed like interests and intermixed groups within groups. You cannot really just go and say like, oh, the Christians support this, or like the Shia support this, and so on and so on, right?
I
Like,
mean, I could give you a different example, but I think your point would be solidified. Is I don't know if you know this famous sheikh, Nimr al-Nimr. He was a Saudi cleric, and he was executed by the Saudis for his, let's just say, very negative opinions about the Saudi family.
mhm.
Now, he was a Shia. Now, based on the perception that people might have, you say, oh, he's Shia, so he must be against pro-Assad, you might think. But you know
Ah,
what he said about Assad? He said the Assads in Syria are oppressors. We do not defend oppressors, and those oppressed shouldn't defend the oppressors. So, in spite the perception that people might have, oh, he's a Shia cleric, that means he's probably pro-Iran, and because he's pro-Iran, he must be pro-Assad. No, he was critical of the Assad regime. He called him a murderer, a dictator. And
Yeah.
this brings me to this point. Just because you're Shia doesn't make you automatically a agent of Iran. And unfortunately, there is this stereotype, and I think it borderlines a little bit with, I think, a lot of Jewish people experience by saying they're like fifth agent of Israel. There is
Mhm.
this perception about, oh, Shia, you're agent of Iran, and you're a puppet of Iran, that you're like,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, it's not the case. And I think there are people in Lebanon. Of course, it's difficult, but I
Yeah.
think there are probably many in Lebanon who don't like the Hezbollah, who don't like Hamas, because
Yeah.
they know they're massively corrupt organizations as well, besides the fact that the other issues that they have.
Yeah.
And this example of Nimr al is a perfect example. Conventional wisdom would mean that he would be pro-Assad, but he isn't. He was critical of him.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, it's not the only Shia who I've met who's like critical towards like the main let's say current you could say x-axis countries like you could say like Shia Iranian x-axis and all that like uh, like it's not the first like I also met like a Shia who's like Saudi was like specifically was like liberal and all that and he was like a different view but also like during the war in Yemen so there are the Houthis so I talked with I had some like when I was studying there, and also later I came to visit. It was in Poland back then. So I have some friends who are from Yemen who live there, and one of them was also Shia, and I asked him like if he supports back then the Houthis. Like it was before all the mess with Houthis that we have today. But I was just interested, like if he supports the Houthis or supports the others, and said like no, like I belong to a sect that does not support them, and specifically we support like the like governmental forces of Yemen, and I was like, yeah, I was surprised, and I was like, even though I shouldn't have been, but I was younger and all that, and I mean, again, like people assume that somebody is like from certain sect, religion, whatever, and like immediately they are being like kind of like their political opinions are being assumed like somehow.
Yeah. I mean, the case of Yemen is interesting because technically speaking, everyone thinks that Shias are all the same, but
Mhm.
technically speaking, they're Zaydi Shias.
Mm,
The what's it called the official name I think is Al Islam or something, Jaish al Islam or something. I think if I remember. Anyway, so they are Zaydi. There are seven Imam Shias, while in Iran we are the Jafari Shias, which are
mm.
the 12 Imam Shias, basically. I know for outsiders it sounds weird to
Yeah,
say
so
the difference.
no, I heard the term. I think I heard the term like Zaidi. Yeah, I heard the term. So Zaidi are Houthis Zaidi or not Zaidi? I am not like they're
They
Zaidi
are
basically.
Zaydi. They're
Yeah,
basically Zaydi. There are seven Imam Shias. They
but
have this one person who's different to the one Imam, seventh Imam of them
mm,
is different. It's this Zaydi
yeah,
who was their Imam.
but I mean like also like some Zaydis like align with if I understand correctly, or maybe there is another sect there or something. But basically there are some who like because still despite the fact that there are different sects like Zaydis, Houthis are definitely with Iran, right? Like they do align with Iran. They're not the
But
same.
it's not necessarily for religious purposes. It's because,
Yeah.
especially you should understand is that the Houthis established a relationship with Iran significantly recently, I would say.
Hmm.
And before that, there was not. And I think I would say it's a bit of a convenient partnership, similar to, let's say, the Alawites, which the
Yeah.
Iranian Shias kind of technically speaking should consider them to be heretics, if you really
Yeah.
want to take it. But for political purposes, they closed one eye and basically said they're also part of us. But technically speaking, they're also not the same Shias as the Shias of Iran, because I don't know if you know, the Alawites basically they allow drinking of alcohol. It's like
Yeah,
you
I
know,
was
you can
about to
drink.
mention it. I was about to mention it because I discovered it recently and I was in shock. I didn't know that. It's like it's really interesting fact, and it's also yeah. I mean, people not aware of these things, and I don't know. Look, I guess also the thing with Iran is that um, they don't have as much choice as like Saudi Arabia, for example, right? Like they can naturally align with other Sunni countries
But you know what
purely.
happened that resulted in their friendship becoming strong? So you know that Saddam
Mhm,
had a big fight with Assad. They were
mhm,
enemies. They hated each other. And when Saddam consolidated his power, he basically removed the Syrian faction of the Ba'athist party. He killed them all.
mhm, mhm,
And this created this conflict. And when the Iran-Iraq war started, Hafez Assad was essentially the only Arab country that supported Iran during the Iran-Iraq war. And as a result, the relationship improved significantly, which resulted in also Iran kind of supporting them, you know, with Bashar Assad. So essentially, the relationship strengthened because of their common enemy. So a lot of this is again not really about ideology or religion, but because of convenience and common enemies sometimes.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. By the way, so you're saying that other like what back then it was like
The Arab
uh,
countries, essentially, most of them supported Saddam.
yeah, I didn't know that
Uh,
like about
for
that like
example, Jordan was a very big supporter. There was a
mhm,
point where the Iraqis were not able to sell oil in the Persian
mhm.
Gulf, and they basically used the Jordan like a land bridge, basically, to bring it to the Red Sea. So a lot of these countries, Saudi Arabia gave a lot of money,
I
Kuwait as
see.
well.
Yeah,
Ironically, Israel was the only country that kind of supported Iran the most.
yeah. I know that I know actually. Yeah, and again, this is the situation in this sense because first of all, like yeah, Israel perceived also back then Saddam as like a bigger threat, but besides that, also, I mean, again, as I said, like for Sunni countries, it's easier to find mutual interest based on this like religious proximity even though it's never like the main thing, it's usually like just helps. But it's kind of definitely ethnicity also plays a part because like this Arab identity and all that Arab culture and all these things. But still, like it's easier to use that. But like Iran is like really, it's not in a situation to kind of pick and choose friends because they need kind of to allow like they cannot say like oh those are Alawites we'll not collaborate with them because they're heretics or like oh those are Zaidi we don't wouldn't collaborate with them because they don't believe exactly the same thing as us like because there are not many Shia like who exactly believe the same thing as Iran, right? So they cannot choose like for example Sunnis they have like the Sunni countries they have kind of this uh, uh, like privilege of like being like oh I can go with this country but I will not go with this country because there are enough potential allies around like who are close in the same religious views and the same like there are enough countries which are Sunni and Arab, for example, right? But there are
Yeah,
not many like which other country there is which is like Persian slash Iranian ethnically and like the exact stream of Shia that they are. There aren't like there are no. So you need kind of to work with what you have, like kind of collaborate with different other minorities and so on in order uh, to kind of keep floating, right? Like
you know
over
that
there.
the biggest irony for Iran is that Iran always had this belief that all Islamic countries should unite. This was from the
Uh-huh.
1979 revolution, the pan-Islamic value, and it didn't really work out because in the end, the sectarianism always ended up making a conflict. And the interesting thing is that when the Islamic Republic was established, they even tried to remove certain anti-Sunni things from the government, from the society, to appease. the
Mm.
Sunnis. But even that didn't work. For example, I don't know if you know, but the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad, the
Mhm.
Sunnis celebrate on one day, and 1 week later, I think it's celebrated by Shias, basically. So it's like a 1 week. It's similar to, let's say, with Christmas and the Orthodox. And the
Yeah,
Iranian
I
government
thought so.
decided to establish a week of unity, it is called. They celebrate. So that like
Uh-huh.
that's way to celebrate. They say, look, we have differences, but we can, week of unity. But
But
that didn't work out.
yeah.
Yeah.
I discovered something while living in Greece that I didn't know, that apparently, like the Orthodox in Greece, they celebrate the Christmas at the same time as they use the same calendar because of that, like religiously. So they celebrate Christmas at the same time as the rest of Europe, which is Catholic majority or like Protestant or whatever. But like the same as Western Christianity, even though they are Eastern Christianity,
Mhm.
and they're Orthodox, so they're supposed to, but they follow this. So there is like even not similar dissimilarity in this sense between also Orthodox in this sense, because Ukraine and Russia and like all the other, like I don't know, Romania, I think also, like they still celebrate it with this difference, like by the old calendar, I think.
I
Uh,
think Ukraine changed it, by the way. Ukraine is now celebrating also on the 25th, by
oh,
the way.
also, yeah,
They
yeah, it
changed
could.
recently.
Yeah, I guess this is like this European solidarity thing as well. It works better for them than for Iran. I guess what maybe plays a part is like secularism. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what like, in the sense that like I think the guiding factor in like Europe today, like in European Union, would be more like secularist values than like than Christianity, despite what uh, traditionalists would want, but they're a
Yeah, I
minority.
mean, since the Enlightenment, I would say the influence of religious institutions in Europe has significantly went down to the extent that we have not seen in the Middle East. I think even Israel, it is a secular country, but still has a lot of religious aspects behind it, I
Israel,
think.
yeah, Israel has like a big problem of separation of religion and state in this sense. It's like far behind. Like I mean, there are some European countries which have a problem of separation of religion and state. Actually, Greece is one of them, by the way. Not on the same level as Israel, of course, but they do have a problem. And you have like I think to a certain extent, maybe you can say Italy as well. But besides that, maybe Poland. Even though Poland not exactly, Poland least so, but they have other, like they do have like a huge Christianity as well, kind of influx in their politics that, like I don't know, I wouldn't go to Polish politics much, but it does have play a part there. But besides those specific examples, you like
Mm.
definitely Israel is like, but Poland do have like secular laws. I do know that like there are problems with separation of religion and state, with church and state in Greece, for example, similar to how in Israel, even though I think in Israel it's like worse. But anyway, different topic. But if we
Yeah.
already mentioned this, like it's a really good time to switch to Europe, because we originally began discussing this with about your elections in Austria, right? That's what's going
Correct.
on.
So
Yeah.
it's good that you mentioned. I will, since I mentioned, so on 29th of September, we had the Austrian federal elections. And for the first time since the Second World War, we have the Freedom Party becoming first. Now,
Uh-huh.
the Freedom Party used to have coalitions with the conservatives, but they used to always play the junior partners. But what has changed essentially is that for the first time, we are in a situation where it's possible that the Freedom Party could do the chancellery. And initially, when the elections happened in September 29th, the attempt was done by the president to make the second biggest party do a coalition with the other party, like a centrist coalition, you could say. And what happened is that they did these negotiations for 3 months, from September to like Christmas. And after like end of December, January, essentially all of them gave up. And as a result, the leader of the conservatives resigned because he was someone who was very I don't want to say stubborn, I don't know if that's the term, but he was very keen on not having become vice chancellor. And now we have a new leader of the Conservatives, and now they're negotiating. And it looks like it's inevitable to the fact that we're going to see a chancellor by the Freedom Party. By this man is called Kickel, and let's just say he has, at least when it comes to height, very similar height to a certain Austrian painter that many people might know.
Yeah.
And he has also his style of communication. Let's just say he's very dogmatic the way he communicates. He called the president of Austria a living mummy.
Okay, I guess that he meant like a mummy in Egypt, right? Like not a mummy, like sugar.
Like he's dead, basically. He wanted to say like a living mummy.
Yeah. I understand, but just like making sure that it didn't go. Like I saw his picture. They put like this creepy picture with the red wall. Did you see it? Like when he puts like the hand on the, they put it everywhere. It's like a creepy stalker type in all the pictures. Like it's amazing. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if you know the store, just for everyone to understand. This is the door to the office of the presidency of the Austria. So he came from these negotiations, and the man is like very small. I don't know. I think he's like 61,
the president.
60.
Yeah, the president is Van der Bellen. I do
Van der
pronounce
Bellen, exactly. He's
Van der
actually of
Bellen.
Estonian origins, German Estonian origin. Yeah,
Very nice.
he was
nice.
actually even given Estonian citizenship.
Oh, something.
Yeah.
One day I'll have something in common with him when I get like Estonian electronic citizenship, right? Like, why don't we do electronic citizenship in Estonia? Damn it! Like, need this. Like, you know about this, right? Like the e-citizenship.
Yeah, I heard about it. It's quite remarkable.
Amazing.
But yeah, so this Freedom Party is also not that it's very surprising pro-Russian.
Yeah, just a moment. I just wanted to say that, like, so if I was like Van der Bellen, I would keep my doors locked, like really at night. Like I would double, like I will use the two, like all the locks that he has there, like like for any chance, like keep it safe.
I don't know.
Right?
One thing that might be surprising for you is that if you go actually close to the presidency palace of Austria at night, you might see the president of Austria walking his dog. It's because he doesn't have security, because Austria, no one cares. So if you go there at night, like maybe you want to visit, you might see the president of Austria taking his dog outside.
I'm sure the chairman of remind me the name of the chairman of the Freedom Party.
Pickel. Yeah, Pickel. It's a funny name.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. Of course it's Pickel. How could I expect anything else? So Pickel knows all his schedule, like every time that he walks the dog, like for sure. I mean, he has to have Pickel in his name, right? Like it's not the creepy appearance is not enough. Like he needs the name.
Amazing. Before that, we also had this other chancellor in Austria called Dollfuss. I don't know if you heard about his story, the leader of the Austro-fascists. He was also quite small. I don't know, maybe Austrians just like small leaders. I'm joking. It's not as if
they're not trying to overcompensate or anything. But in any case, I wanted to say that like when you said that they gave up on like trying to do like a government, like blocking government that blocks this party, like Pickel's party, the Freedom Party. So I was about to say that they like giving up in Austria, right? Like just like just like with Hitler, how like like back then also.
I should mention seriously one reason why it happened. So the coalition partners included the Conservatives, who were supposed to be the senior partner there, and also the Social Democrats, and they also added the classical liberal neos to give it a bit of bigger majority, basically, like coalition.
Oh,
and
so neos,
social,
neos are like the liberal party. They're like like the German Free Democrats, free.
Yeah, you could say that, yeah. And so the negotiations failed a little bit because of economic purposes, and essentially the business section of the conservatives preferred the Freedom Party because the Freedom Party now co- presents itself as this working class party, like we are for the working class, But essentially, they always, when they were in coalitions with the conservatives, they always were free market, like not free market, but more, let's just say business friendly. And the big businesses essentially pushed for this coalition. So essentially, the big businesses kind of wanted this, they want this more, and they don't mind the xenophobia and racism and the fact that it's a pro-Russian party. I guess for them, the lower taxes and regulations is more important.
Amazing. It's yeah, it's I mean, it's tough. It's tough. Like when like politics is dumb, like as we have in so many countries, and like I see it everywhere, and we're facing this. I mean, we have this problem for a long time, right? But I mean, here in Israel, I mean, but actually in Austria as well, I guess, but not to this level because you had the People's Party, right, like ruling, which is like less horrible.
Yeah, but even they have become terrible. They used to be more like the normal CDU in Germany, you could say, but even they are trying more and more to take the positions of the Freedom Party. Now, they're not anti-EU, and they are certainly more pro-Ukraine, you could say, but they have co-opted basically a lot of the language when it comes to immigration from the Freedom Party.
When did it start, with Kurz or earlier?
I think Kurz would be the first person I would say that really took a much more anti-immigration approach towards his policies.
Because it's kind of, I guess he kind of like needs to like needed to take the party in order to not not to lose votes.
Kurz, I think, is the reason why I think the Freedom Party will be able to become chancellor. I think that he created this monster. And he basically destroyed his party by making it because of his affairs of corruption and media corruption, basically. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, but I mean, I heard about these corruptions, but I mean, he basically made there could be an argument made that he kind of brought their opinions more to the mainstream by the fact that major party suddenly takes like a page from their book and accepts a lot of their ideas, and like then he ran with it, was elected. So on one hand, like I can understand some will criticize him for like by making less distinction between the People's Party, making the distinction smaller between the People's Party and the Freedom Party, let's call them. So, I mean, that's how they're called, but we all know that they're not the Freedom Party. Now, so by making this like smaller distinction, obviously people at some point might prefer maybe the real thing than the copy, right?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, people want the original. They don't want the fake copy.
Yeah.
And I feel like they basically threw the Muslims and the immigrants under the bus, the ÖVP. Not that I actually supported them, but at least before they were trying to appease Muslims, now they don't even care. And to be honest, it's becoming all parties. Even the previous coalition that I mentioned, they negotiated, they wanted to ban the hijab, by the way. I think that was one of the things they accepted. So even the other parties are becoming, in this case, really bad. And in Germany, it's also bad that the FDP, which was supposed to be the classical liberal party, is now taking much more anti-immigration slogans. So unfortunately, you could say the anti-immigration people have won. They've taken over the complete consensus. And at the moment, as far as I recall, there is no real other party. I think calling yourself open borders is like political suicide at the moment. I don't think any party is going to say we're open borders.
Yeah, it's a tough spot.
By the way, something funny, I don't know if you heard about this. It's a bit time has passed, but did you hear about Alice Weidel, the leader of the AfD? She had a she had this talk with Elon Musk, and basically in her in her Twitter talk or X talk, she said that Hitler was a communist.
I just want to say that X-Talk sounds like something from an adult website. X-Talk, like, oh my god! But yeah, but that's what it is. That's era of That's the era of our Saluter. I even forgot it, how anyway, like so Musk, era of Musk, and
I
yeah,
sometimes think he thinks he's Paul Atreides.
it might be. This is
When you buy
to
from Wish.
Yeah, from Wish, of course. Yeah, now there is Temu, right? Like Temo,
Yeah.
but I don't think that all the people will understand the Paul Atreides reference, even though,
Oh.
it's still popular. The movie is popular, but still, I am not sure if that much. Let's see. Uh, so she appeared. You said that what? Can you repeat the last part, just like for me to
So
get home?
basically, Alice Weidel in her talk said that one of the biggest tricks that the media does is that they created this perception that Hitler was conservative or libertarian, which,
Yeah.
by the way, no one called Hitler libertarian. I don't
Yeah,
recall anyone called.
of course, yeah, of course. No, maybe some like far leftists, but nobody takes them seriously.
Yeah.
Uh, I actually seen this quote, like it appeared like somewhere along my like news feed timeline, all that. Yeah, I mean, I'm already not surprised by it. Like, I mean, like it's a common populist right talk. It's a popular kind of like talking point that they use to say like, oh, he was a socialist. And yeah, like, I mean, that's uh, that's just what they like to say. I don't think that it has, as much as I dislike socialism, that's not that's not something that you can really, like, you cannot really put him at the same spot with them, even though you can talk about all these um, the horseshoe theory, but that's something different. That's something different already. But in this sense, you might talk, but you can never like really seriously claim that he's a socialist, like in the Marxist sense or whatever.
And you should understand about the Nazis is that economically speaking, yes, they were advocates of a more interventionist economy, and they did create social programs that were similar to what, let's say, Franklin D. Roosevelt did with the New Deal program. But it's still more complicated. He was not pro-union. He basically did help big business. Big business supported him. Big business also funded him a lot. A lot of people, like I think there was this very famous newspaper journalist, Hugenberg, I think I forgot his name. He financially supported him from the initial stages, and in the end, he did help big business a lot, especially during the Second World War. Of course, big businesses that were not Jewish, of course, they were basically they stole their stuff.
Yeah, or businesses that are good for him. Like, of course, like I mean, it was, you could say, like also like maybe crony capitalism or like maybe state capitalism to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I do remember like kind of these details about how he basically took like like the this party originally like had a very anti-capitalist sense, and then they overall later changed it, and like in order to collaborate with big companies. So of course you cannot still say like something that leftists like the leftist bubble would sometimes claim like, oh, Hitler was like they would almost say like neoliberal or something, right? Like he was like a dirty capitalist and all that, and it's like and obviously he wasn't that. He wasn't like free market. He wasn't pro free market, but he also wasn't a socialist, and he just did whatever like his uh, I would say it's like the closest thing to right wing populism. This was right wing populism de facto. Like he did whatever is beneficial for him, for his like preserving his regime, preserving his like kind of like pursuing his interest, specific interest, and he didn't have like this kind of uh, like it wasn't something very concrete that he had like he didn't have like this kind of strict like economical ideology that he followed whatever is like beneficial for progressing his other aims, like which is
Yeah,
like
it was a means to an end, essentially.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And
I think
it's
it's
not
fair to say that for him, it was the anti-Semitism, which was the position that he took, that was the most principle that he held. It wasn't the fact that what economic system he wanted. He didn't care about those things. For him, it was trivial compared to the idea of creating a big empire.
yeah, I mean in the sense of uh, like the I would say generally racial ideology that he had, like this kind of but you know what? Let's go away for a bit from this topic. Just like I wanted to, even though it is connected, because when you mentioned like this change in Austria, okay, in regards to treatment of Muslims and all that, like how would you like this is something that was interesting for me specifically. What is your experience as like a person like either a Muslim or like from Muslim background, like right now in Austria, and specifically compared to the past, like do you feel like this kind of animosity towards like Islamophobia from people? Like, do you feel something on everyday life?
Well, so for me, for people to understand my perspective, I think it's important to mention a little bit about my background. So I grew up in Austria. I was born here, as I mentioned before, but I was someone who actually did not have so much contact with many Austrians due to the fact that I visited a international school,
Mm-hmm.
and as a result of my, I was more with more international people, you could say. And the first time I actually was really emerged towards with the Austrian experience was when I joined the military, which in Austria is mandatory. But unlike yours, it's shorter and not so difficult, 6 months, so it's not the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during this 6 months that I actually was able to have contact with the most Austrian people, you could say. A military is a microcosm of most people, different socioeconomic groups.
Yeah.
And as a result, I met people from working class people. I also met Austrians from migrant class people, as well as maybe also even up affluent classes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I maybe was able to realize and see Austrian people for the first time. And some things made me a little bit pessimistic. I have to mention is that especially the higher ups, I saw a lot of things that kind of made me realize that people talk about Austria and its past. Let's just say a lot of these people were full, still very sympathetic views towards Nazism.
Amazing.
Yeah, let's just say I talked to one of the guys and I kind of played the Borat. For people to understand, I kind of played. I wanted, when you try to make them say the craziest stuff, but not like Borat, but more,
Yeah.
I said, yeah, things were not so bad back then. I was like this undercover tape. I did
Ah,
that
yeah.
fake.
Yeah.
And
I get it.
many of these people would say, yeah, I agree. Things was much better back then. It's like this game I played. I didn't
Oh
care.
God. Yeah.
And
I get what
one of the people said, yeah, this guy was like responsible for us. He has Mein Kampf in his store thing in his office. And I was like, oh my
Oh.
God, these people. And thus I realized a little bit that the Austria that we see in the media, the waltz and the Mozart and all of these things. A lot of this animosity and racism and xenophobia exists in Austria, and a lot of people don't know it. I don't know about Germany, so I can't really say because I haven't lived in Germany. But I think that that's why I understand why parties like the Freedom Party win. But I think now the animosity has gone less from the Jewish people. I think they've become some I think become more not sympathetic, but they don't see them as a threat anymore as they used to. And I
Yeah.
think that now the Muslims are the threat that they perceive because we're much larger people.
Mhm. I do like. I mean, I think Austria, like how I see it by the people who are being elected in the recent years. No, not only like I mean, like since I remember, like Austria, like is a very right-wing country, like, and I think that the only countries that are as right-wing in Europe that I can think of is Italy, actually, I think, and because
And the
they
interesting
always
thing is Austria was very left wing, I would say.
uh,
We used to have interesting fact in the 1980s. We had a very strong social democrat. I don't know if you heard of the Bruno Kreisky.
class
Uh, Bruno Kreisky was the chancellor of Austria from the late
Pol-
70s to the late
Polish
80s.
Polish origin.
But interesting fact, he was actually Jewish. He was Jewish, social democrat, socialist, you
Oh
could say. He was
well,
very left wing.
Jewish
And
probably from like the surname is Like I know because my surname is Polish, so like all these ski, all these things
mm,
like our like this region of like so interesting
a
like
lot of
so.
Austrians have probably Polish or Czech. Many
Mm.
Austrians have Czech names, to be honest, but they're assimilated Czechs or assimilated Poles. You
So
know,
there was a Jew from Social Democrats who was like
yeah,
for a long time was the chancellor of
yeah. An interesting fact. I can talk about this. A very big topic. You
uh,
know this man by the name of not the Austrian, the Jew hunter. What was his name? He was also Austrian. Wiesenthal. You heard of this man by the name of Wiesenthal?
Wiesenthal.
Simon Wiesenthal.
Shimon Wiesenthal. Yeah.
Exactly. And he had a big conflict with him
No,
because
not Jew
he,
hunter. You mean like Nazi hunter?
a Nazi hunter. I'm so sorry.
It's
That
okay.
was mine. Yeah. Yeah, it was. So he had a big conflict with him on many issues, in spite of the fact that we're both Jewish. Let's just
Mhm,
say, in spite of the fact that he was Jewish, Bruno Kreisky was kind of unorthodox in his views. He invited
mhm.
Gaddafi. He was very pro-Palestinian.
Uh,
So it was a bit weird personality, you could say,
mhm.
which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And
Well. Mhm.
yeah, and he
Continue.
was quite social. And interesting fact, he did a coalition with the Freedom Party, the same party that we talked about. And
Uh,
in this coalition, it included some of the ministers who were Nazi members in the Second World War.
the
Yeah, so
well,
Austria has a really crazy history.
well, that's interesting. I never knew about him, but it sounds like something interesting to research. It actually reminds me of this like I forgot her first name, but Sheinfeld, I think this is her like from Mexico, the new president of Mexico.
Steinbaum, you mean, I think.
Scheinbaum, not Sheinfeld. Yeah, like Scheinbaum. So she's relatively pro-Palestinian. Like, of course, like it's not black and white, but like she's relatively more pro-Palestinian by her views, and she's a lefty, and she's Jewish. And then there was like this meme that showed like the I think the president of Ecuador who's like was it of I hope I'm not mistaken, but like basically he's a Palestinian, but he's has very good relations with Israel, and
Mhm.
they show like a picture. No, it's not Ecuador. It's
You mean Bolivia or
no
Venezuela?
no. Of course not. There is a Palestine. Venezuela is like isn't it Maduro yet? Like
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
just
It's
a sec.
definitely not Millet.
No. Uh, can, so I forgot, like here, Naib El Salvador. That's what El
Ah,
Salvador.
yes,
So,
he's Palestinian descent, I
he's
think.
Palestinian descent, yeah, and he's like very good relations with Israel. It's like it taken pictures with like Israeli ministers, like next to the Israeli flag, so on. It's very positive towards
Mhm.
Israel, and then there was this picture showing like only in Latin America you have like you have a Jewish president of Mexico who's like pro-Palestinian, and a Palestinian president of like El Salvador, and he's like he's pro-Israeli. Like that's just the world. Like that's how it works. That's
Yeah,
yeah. So, but well, so I think that even though we had like much more to discuss. I guess we have to wrap up and finish.
yeah. I think the people are
Oh,
getting tired. We've given too much information. I think their heads are exploding. So,
oh, definitely, definitely. And now I just want to say that it was a pleasure of having you here. I hope we'll have more interesting conversation on this podcast and on other podcasts as well in the future. Who knows which ones? We'll be looking forward for it.
absolutely. And if anyone is interested, I'm just reading Dune, and I know that you are also interested in Dune. So maybe we can have some talk about that as well. So we'll see.
Oh, definitely, definitely. That's whole. I think before that we had like a mini podcast of our own about Dune, but it wasn't recorded. So we had before that. So and we could make it live one day, like
Hmm?
even in the near future, would be amazing. Would be really
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe for premium subscribers of the podcast.
amazing. Definitely, give me money and. So yeah, like that's good. Have a great evening and great weekend.